Wheels up. Welcome back to the KATALYST podcast. I am super excited to continue on as we look to kind of end the year and what a year it's been. But I'm excited to be with Brad Smith of Stellar Insight Inc. Today. Thank you for being here, Brad. Before I turn it over to you, I just want to start by saying, I'm excited about this conversation and just Brad's heart for leadership, us getting to know each other, connecting through LinkedIn, and being able to kind of share a few things before we jump into this. So I'm excited about this discussion. Brad, if you will, just kind of kick us off with a bit about yourself, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, so sorry, while I throw this stuff away. So let's see. I was born into the world. My dad was working on by the time I was 6 months old, my dad, who had his bachelor's in chemical engineering, was working on his PhD in biochemistry. His goal was to solve the world food problem because he'd seen things in Germany during the war that upset him a lot. Essentially the story was a grandmother and an 8-year-old boy fighting over garbage in an alley at 2 o'clock in the morning because there was not enough food for them to eat, right? Mm-hmm. So he and I talked about that for years. So I grew up in an invention household. He invented the liquid diet drink industry, went to Evansville, Indiana, came out with Metrical and Nutriment, which were the first ones in the market, right? And we went from there. So I was one of the guinea pig kids, 2 brothers, 2 sisters, but there. So I grew up in a household where he was training me to be an engineer, think like an engineer, and also be a chemist. So at 8 years old, he had me out in his lean-to lab, working in beakers to grow tomato plants, hydroponics. And then when the first chemical sweetener came out, we spent 3 months trying to figure out how to make a diet cola before the first one, Tab, hit the market. And we never did get it right because it was always bitter. It was like always bitter. So bitter. It's like, okay, that's a bad taste. We're not doing that. That's the household I grew up in. Going through college, I did chemical engineering, then switched over through pre-med to biochemistry, got within a couple of terms of biochemistry, stopped because of a lot of really bad grades, bad relationship, and all that adventure. Went back and finished my bachelor's in business management so that I could manage R&D teams because I love that idea. Mm-hmm. Right? Well, I got shifted through that, went through that, finished my MBA, the marriage, and then finished the MBA, and realized along the way that what I really loved was helping companies grow, because in addition to the chemistry, I watched my dad start 34 companies and kill 30 of them because he didn't have all the pieces in place. Mm. Before the 3 that are still running, like 50 years later, he didn't manage. There we go, right? Yeah. So part of what I do is to give back to people what I've learned. One of my biggest events that happened at 18, fall term freshman year at Oregon State, was I developed a bleeding ulcer, ulcerated colon. And the doctor said to me when I got to him in December 20th or something like that, he said, "Gee, Brad, if you'd have waited 6 weeks to come see me, you'd have bled to death." It's wow. And it was true, right? So 18-year-old, he had my full attention, right? And he said, "You'll never eat strawberries, corn, or lettuce or anything with roughage ever again in your life." And my 18-year-old brain said, "Fat chance, buddy, that ain't happening." Mm-hmm. And then he said, which was pretty profound for that time, you have a psychosomatic disease. Your emotions affect the severity of your symptoms. And in that moment, I made the commitment. I didn't know all the details of it, but I was going to conquer that disease by looking at my emotions, tracking my emotions, and rewiring them, although I didn't have that term at the time, rewiring them so that I didn't, I wasn't bleeding all the time and I wasn't in pain all the time, and I could eat strawberries, corn, and lettuce, right?
Right.
So it took me, changed my diet, used his medication. Medication didn't work. Changed my diet, got the bleeding stopped about a year and a half later. But what I learned out of that is to track long-term patterns in emotions. And so what I did was I learned Brad really, really well. By learning Brad really, really well, I then realized this is the screen that we use to monitor and view and understand people outside us. That is, if you want to know, is the core of leadership. Because leadership is not an analytical mind thing. Leadership is a heart thing. So that's why I do the work I do, is to help people learn how to inspire each other and inspire themselves. So here's a piece of homework for your watchers, right? Learn how to self-inspire. Learn what motivates you, understand why it motivates you, and go deeper into your why. And the deeper you go into your why, the better you will understand from yourself out how the world works, which has been my journey. I understand how people work, understand how businesses work, and understand what makes them successful. And I love turning people on and waking them up.
That's awesome. And so a couple of things that stand out, which I think is a cool mashup of skills and personalities and passions, is you have the more technical aspect of chemical engineering, or I'm sorry, like,
chemistry. I was an analytical chemist, formulation chemist for more than 10 years.
Okay. And then I think you mentioned something about engineering, so I combine those. But my point being, you have that like very thoughtful design of experiments background where, and your dad demonstrated this to you. It sounds like with 33 businesses or 34, and only 10% of that really coming to fruition years later. The thought process being that, if you have a meaningful way to go about things, and the interesting thing to me and kind of how I've listened to you describe this is you're also talking about being able to control emotions, and that aspect of being a human being and a leader, which I think is a fantastic way to kind of put those together and talk about being thoughtful, being able to kind of chart things out, come at things in a very meaningful way, even if it's just kind of an experiment, but also being able to kind of stay in tune with the heart. That's my major takeaway from what you just said.
Yeah. Okay. I look at it this way. I did chemistry, right? I was trained to be a chemist. At 18, when I made my decisions, I believed in cause and effect. If you push, something will move, right? So if I've got movement, a psychosomatic disease, right? It's like, and I had a cousin die from that, right? Not cool, right?
Yeah.
But if I'd understood that person, she had that as an issue, I would have gone in and said, look, there are ways to fix this, right? And they don't involve chemicals. They involve your will and your awareness. So first piece of homework, right? Be aware.